art helps people heal, whether it's visual arts or drawing or songwriting. Any kind of art is very therapeutic. I think that's actually why therapists use art as a means of therapy. I will say my ex and I have always been on the same page as it should always be about the kids. Their well being comes first, but I'm still the one managing the calendar. I'm still the one breaking my plans if I have plans because he wants to take his girlfriend out for XYZ, whatever it is. Yes, I will take the kids. And part of me is like, is that because I'm a people pleaser or is it just because I want my kid? But I mentioned to him, I'm like, you manage the finances. I don't even know how much money you're bringing in. I don't even have access to our bank accounts. I was blind. It was like I was blindly in this. I didn't know how much was coming in. I didn't know how much our credit card statement was. And I'm not kidding you, Karen. So like, what's the word I'm looking for? As an accountant, that's shameless. I feel like I should have been more aware of what our finances were. Yes, I kind of signed on the dotted line because I'm just like, I just want this done. I just want this done. Like, can we just move on with our lives? Always being on part and it really is so true. It's almost like you're on this autopilot or driven by a motor or whatever. It's like, okay, this needs to get done. This needs to get done. This needs to get done. And there's really no time to realize that you're kind of spiraling into this, people pleasing mode because it just needs to get done.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Just Separated podcast. I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I help people navigate the emotional, legal, and practical challenges of divorce, including high conflict and narcissist relationships. Each week, I am joined by expert guests to share guidance, tools, and strategies so you can move forward with clarity, confidence, and resilience. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many layers of divorce. Subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Hi, welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, co-founder of Divorce Workshop. Today we're going to talk about people pleasing, fawning, and our expert guest is Natalie Odo. Natalie is in her sophomore year as a host of the Eager to Please podcast, a passion project she launched after nearly 40 years of putting everyone else's needs before her own. An accountant by trade, Natalie's true love, aside from her 3 daughters and dog, is songwriting. Through original songs woven into monthly episodes, she shares content that is real, honest, and deeply heartfelt, inspired by the phases of life she has lived and known so many others have experienced too. Her mission is to shed light on the struggles she's faced, offering connection, clarity, and hope to those navigating similar murky waters. Natalie, welcome to the Just Separate podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Karen. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So, Natalie, you launched your podcast after 40 years of being the ultimate people pleaser. For our listeners who feel stuck in a life they didn't choose, what was that specific moment, that enough is enough moment, where you realized that people pleasing, fawning others was actually maybe destroying you?
That's a great question. I actually don't know that I would have come to that conclusion myself had COVID not happened. And I've mentioned this before that I do feel like that was the catalyst for me when the world kind of shut down and we were kind of stopped in our tracks. My life at that point had been filled with kids' activities left and right. We were constantly running. I feel like now looking back, I was running from my childhood and my past. My dad had passed away when I was young and then followed maybe 10 years later by my sister. So there had been some things that I hadn't dealt with, you know, prior to getting married that I brought with my marriage. And then when you start layering on more complications, you just don't have time to deal with any of that stuff. And I just kept burying it and burying it and burying it. And like I said, when the world kind of was forced to shut down and my life went from 100 miles an hour to literally stopped in its tracks, I just felt this overwhelming sense of, what am I doing? What is going on here? I'm so unhappy. Why am I so unhappy? I mean, I had the picture perfect life. I had 3 healthy kids, a husband who was, you know, working to support his family. We had a nice home. We lived in a great area. And I just felt like I was so unsatisfied and just not fulfilled. And so for me, I think it was COVID that really put things in perspective for me. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, so you talk about what I heard you say is like the facade.
right? Like, and I've
Mm.
heard this before from others, right? It's like this facade, you had this nice house, but what was inside the house? Did you feel any resentment? Anything like that come up?
Well, oh, 100%. And it was almost, hindsight is 2020. I didn't realize I was going to be resentful because my ex-husband and I met at work. We were both accountants. And when we decided to start a family, it was my career that we decided to put on hold, and we collectively made this decision. It wasn't him saying, come in and strong arming me saying, okay, you're going to stay at home, you're going to raise the kids. We made that decision together because what I was making was not going to do anything other than cover the childcare. And so I'm like, well, why am I paying for someone to watch my kids? I want to raise my kids. I want to watch my kids and see them take their first step and, you know, draw their first picture or whatever. So we decided I would be the one to do that. And as he, advanced in his career, or at least I thought he was advancing in his career, he never felt like he was successful enough and never making enough money and never getting to the place where he wanted to be. And so at one point I thought to myself, well, is this even worth it? If you're not getting to where you want to be and I've sacrificed all these years already, this is super frustrating. What's the problem here? And where's the disconnect? So I think yes, resentment did play a part into it. I also feel like, you have mom brain and mom fog when you're in it. You just kind of are living groundhog day all day, every day. And again, I do want to say I am very grateful for those years with my kids. You can never get those baby years back. And I, you know, cherish those. But you lose a part of yourself as a woman when you're in the mom brain fog days and feeling like you don't have an outlet for yourself because your life essentially revolves around making sure those kids are taken care of and the house is clean and meals are cooked and laundry's done and they're going to their doctor's appointments and all the extracurriculars. And going back to the whole resentment thing, my ex-husband just had to go to work. And I say just had to go to work. That's a huge responsibility. I understand. But when he came home, dinner was made. He didn't make dinner. And at one point, when we decided we needed couples counseling, it had come out and he admitted there was one day I had forgotten a gallon of milk or something like that at the grocery store. And I had messaged him to pick one up on the way home. And he got so irritated with me because he had already put in a full day at the office. And the last thing he wanted to do was make a 5-minute stop at the grocery store to pick up a gallon of milk and then come home. And he admitted, he's like, I didn't realize that I was being kind of like petty about that because you would have had to have lugged 3 kids to the grocery store to pick up the gallon of milk. It would have been a heck of a lot harder for you to do that than for me just to take one person in and get the milk and then come home and then not have to worry about buckling everyone up in their, car seats and stuff. So, I feel like hindsight, like I said, is 2020 and you try to see the other person's perspective, but when you're in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to see that.
Do you think that when you're in it, and I so understand the brain fog with especially when they're young, and I'm like you, I would never take those years back. Um, do you think though that people aren't even aware that we are doing what we're doing?
I don't. I think it's somewhat programmed in us. I saw my mom kind of doing the same thing. She would be the hoster and make sure everyone is taken care of. And one of those things I saw something post on Instagram that came up on my feed, probably just from other things that I have liked. And it's like in certain years, when you're a little girl, you need your mom because you're little. And then when you get to your teens, you're kind of like, oh, she's so strict and da da da. And then when you get to your 20s into your 30s, you start understanding that she's a person too. Like she has all the same feelings and insecurities and whatever else that you're dealing with right now. But I watched her carry a household. My dad had ALS, so he was deteriorating and she had to do everything. And I saw that, not necessarily having an appreciation for it until now. It's like one of those things like, holy smokes, you had a lot on your plate.
Yeah, when you're thinking, I was just seeing how your reaction with that. But also it reminds me of my mother too, right? When she had to go through her divorce in the '70s and what she went through. And
Mhm.
wow, I mean, but I do think there's a learning thing there too, because I learned from my mom to be the people pleaser fawner. And I
Mhm.
really, for my children, I have 2 daughters. I don't want them to be the fawner people pleasers, right? Like
Exactly.
that's, I don't know what your thoughts about that is.
I 100% agree with you. I think mine stemmed from just wanting attention from my dad because my parents were significantly there was a significant age gap between my mom and my dad. And I think I was just craving his attention. And to get his attention, I got straight A's and I was the performer and carry that probably into my adult years, quite honestly. And same as you, Karen, I have 3 daughters and I do not want them to feel like they have to, you know, lower their standards just to appease someone else or make themselves uncomfortable or unhappy just to gain someone's approval. And I feel like people like us, these fawners and appeasers, that's how we attribute success and worthiness. And quite honestly, it's false.
Where do you think this, like, I'm gonna say early on when I went through my divorce and I started kind of waking up, and I'm about 8 years post, and I remember saying, I think I'm a people pleaser. Like, I started kinda going, I seem to give a lot of myself and I was kind of wakening up to that. And then
Mhm.
I would call the other people who I was people pleasing, "You're the takers," right? I don't know if you ever
Mhm.
heard this type of language. "Oh,
Mhm.
they're taking, I'm a people pleaser." And I came across the people pleasing, "Oh, well, I'm being kind."
Yes.
Okay, and let's talk about that, because there's no kindness when you're people pleasing, like I still kinda do sometimes, and
Yep.
like I was. I don't know your
Mhm.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because there is a difference between pleasing other people and being kind. And I feel like I'm like you, Karen, still trying to figure out that difference. I feel like the more the more work I'm doing on myself, the more I can kind of see being kind doesn't necessarily mean you have to say yes all the time. You know, maybe that is the answer. It's like you can still be a kind person and no is an acceptable answer or this is not the right time for me. Um the other thing I feel like that couples with that is the over explaining why you can't do something. It should be okay to just say no, period, or I can't, period, or whatever, insert whatever you want. But I always find the need to explain myself. Well, this is why I can't do it. Please don't hate me or please don't be upset with me because I can't do this because I have XYZ. And then I stress myself out probably even more because I'm explaining away and maybe they don't even care. Maybe no or I can't is good enough for them, but I'm telling myself, I really want to help you, but this is why I can't. The other thing I find interesting is that as a people pleaser, and maybe this goes back to your whole kindness versus people pleasing question is that, I would give the shirt off my back for someone who needed it, but maybe not everyone would do that for me. And so then you get this, well, I don't understand. What did I do to make you upset? Like, why wouldn't you do that for me if I'm doing that for you? I mean, that can be in relationships too. And the t-shirt is just a simple example, but I'm talking about maybe like a love interest. Well, I'm doing this for you. Why can't you give that back to me? So there's that piece that, you kinda have to work through as well.
I often wonder why that comes up though,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Is it a need for approval? Is it need for something, right? Like, there's something there. Another thing I wanted to say is the guilt.
Mm,
So, I've talked about this before, is even now, I'll give
mhm,
you a scenario. My partner and I, he was supposed to go to his friend's, thing or something, and I was supposed to go, and I didn't feel very well, but I didn't wanna go.
mhm.
Old Karen would have been like, "Okay, I'll go." But new Karen was like, "No, but I can tell you the guilt." I was racked. I was like, "Oh, well, okay. Oh my goodness, I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
bad person." That was my old programming that came up. I'm a bad person because I
Mhm.
said no. And I wanted everybody that it's in our community, which we're trying to grow, right, Natalie,
Right, that's right.
understands this is when you say no, there's going to be those feelings that come up.
Yes.
And that justifying, we call it jading, justifying everything. That is very, very common. We have to say, well, I just have to do this, or I have to just do this. So we need to be more aware of that. And I want to talk a little bit about community, because I think
Mhm.
community is essential. What are your thoughts?
Ah, 100% think it's essential. I I feel like I'm just now realizing that though, because for the first it'll be 3 years since my divorce in June. And so we're coming up on 3 years. And for the first probably good 2 years, I squirreled myself away and just kind of isolated myself from old friends and even family members and, you know, life in general, doing things I actually enjoyed doing because I just felt so depressed and terrible. I don't even know how to describe it, about the divorce and how did this happen? This is obviously not how I expected my life to be, and, you know, I was ashamed and didn't wanna talk about the divorce, and in fact, I didn't even say that I was divorced, and somehow, people find out eventually, obviously, when they see that you're not together or they see you with the U-Haul in the driveway moving out big beds and stuff like that, so people know. But I think the challenge is that they don't know how to comfort you in that phase of your life. I had 0 people reach out to me, 0, say, "Very sorry to hear, let me know, you know, how we can support you." I mean, obviously, my parents did. My mom and my stepdad knew and were supportive, and my sisters, but, you know, as far as friends, they just don't know how to talk to you because they know you as a couple. They don't know you as an individual out of that relationship. So I do feel like community is super important to get you through that because maybe I would have snapped out of it a lot sooner than 2 years had I allowed people to come in, but I didn't. So you just take it as a snapshot and I guess move forward from there.
I just want to talk to you a little bit about when you, as a fawner or people pleaser, and you get divorced.
Mhm.
Did you continue people pleasing with your ex?
Oh, yes. And I still do. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's an interesting question because at the end of the day, it's all about the kids in my mind. We've got an 11, a 13, and a 15-year-old. So they're still young, getting to that phase where they're, independent ish. And I will say my ex and I have always been on the same page as it should always be about the kids. you know, their well-being comes first, but I'm still the one managing the calendar. I'm still the one breaking my plans if I have plans because he wants to take his girlfriend out for XYZ, whatever it is. Yes, I will take the kids. And part of me is like, is that because I'm a people pleaser or is it just because I want my kids? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the best interest of the child is definitely 100%.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm not sure, depending how many times he's doing it, right? But
Yeah,
my
yeah,
point is like, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. Is
yeah.
um 19 years, finally had the courage to leave. It was
Mhm.
antagonistic marriage, and I packed for him.
Hmm.
I went through the photos, I did everything. I gave him the good towels. I did everything. Because for some reason I'm like, okay, I felt so much guilt or something. Like
Mhm.
I did one time he came in, didn't tell me he was coming in, walked in, said, "Can you go buy my mom a gift?" We had been separated 3 months. And what did I do? Instead of saying, "No, I can't. That's not my job anymore." I
Right.
did it. I did
Mhm.
it. So I'm
Mhm.
just saying to the listeners, this is how people pleasing with your children, that's a different ball game.
Right.
Do what's best for your children, but don't do what I did, because I don't know, I was such a fawner. I just was living in that constant hyper vigilant, and then fawning, which was that, kind of like that quiet person, not wanting to cause any ruffles or any
Right.
upset. So
Mhm.
just be mindful If you're a people pleaser or fawner and you get divorced, that just doesn't go away.
Exactly. Yeah, so true.
Is that one of the reasons why you started the podcast?
That might be a loaded question too. I feel like for me as a songwriter, and I was writing through a lot of these feelings, I wanted a way to, I guess, express those. And so when I had shared the idea with a couple of my closest mentors, they're like, "Oh my gosh, Natalie, people would benefit from this. Like they want to hear real raw stories. They don't want to see the fake Facebook stuff that everything is perfect because it's not." And that's not to say everyone wants to hear your dirty laundry either. In fact, I just had my hand slapped from my mom the other day. She goes, "Natalie, that was an appalling podcast episode. You need to take that down." Because I was saying something about, you know, the snowmageddon and um I don't know how my feelings have just been really iced over at that point. We don't need to go into it. The podcast episode is down, so sorry for those people who are looking for some good juicy drama, but you know, all that to say is like I wanted a way to express what I was writing. And when I had, like I said, spoken to some of my mentors, they're like, this is so relatable and people relate, and more and more people sadly are getting divorced. And I don't know if it's because there's this awakening that people are realizing that you don't just have to stay in it to stay in it. And what marriage used to be is not what marriage is now. And if both parties are not coming to the table to support each other, your relationship is just never going to work. And that's kind of where my ex and I were at that point. We just were not meeting in the middle. And I was tired of overgiving and feeling like what I was doing was not important and didn't matter. And so, whether whether I was living independently or with him, I was still going to continue doing what I was doing for our kids and, for the household. So, with one less person to worry about, it's like, okay, then this is the best solution for us. But the podcast really did stem from uh I guess years of just holding on to grief and sadness and whatever else. And hopefully there'll be some, love and enlightenment episodes in there too. Yeah.
But awareness is what I really like about it. This eager to please everybody, it's called, is that, as I said to you before, you're in the thick of it. And I've
Mhm.
been in fawn response since I was a kid because of
Yeah.
my
Mm.
abusive childhood.
Oh
So
gosh, I'm sorry.
so the awareness
Mm.
alone,
Yeah.
right? Like I before you and I start recording, it snowed here. My daughter is off to work and I was this close, everybody. Like if you can see me, if you can't, it's like I was like an inch close to going out and cleaning the car for her because that's my old response.
Mm.
Do, make everybody happy, happy,
Right.
happy. And if everyone's happy, happy, then I'm good. Right. So
Exactly.
I think awareness is what is really important with your podcast is because and people can feel like, okay, oh my goodness, this is me.
Hmm.
What can I do? So let's talk about this "Eager to Please" song. I listened
Yeah.
to it before we went on, and I'm gonna ask, like, and it's I don't know if we have. I mean, it's probably a deep question, but the eager, and that is something that, like, when I heard the song and I went, yeah, there's this eagerness, and I think it's subconscious. I don't think it's always, as I said, awareness, right?
Yeah. For sure.
So, you have any understanding of why we're so eager to please? Is it societal? Is it childhood? Survival?
I
It's
think it's
all of it.
actually, yeah, absolutely. You
Yeah.
just answered that. That's exactly what I was going to say, Karen. I do think it's all of it. I had shared I struggled with that as a child. So I learned behavior from childhood and I carried that through because you when you're that young and impressionable and you're not given the tools to know how to deal with those big heavy, emotions and feelings, you kind of just take that on as your own like, okay, this is just how it's supposed to be and this is how I gain people's respect and their love and their attention by doing for them. And I've always been a doer. How can I help you? How can I help you? What can I do for you to take the load off or make your life easier? And I carry that into adulthood. And I still do that even with work. I'm in a situation right now at work where it's like, okay, I'm the yes person. I'm the yes person. But at some point, it just gets to be like, okay, enough's enough. And I just feel like when you feel out of balance and
and just heavy and something doesn't feel right, then it's worth the internal deep dive to be like, okay, something is off here. What is it? And learning to be good with yourself. I think I've always had a low self-esteem, so that might also be part of it too, is like when you don't feel good about yourself, maybe other people pick up on that and they just latch on to, oh, okay, she'll just say yes and just take it on as her own, and she'll be the fixer. So maybe there's a little bit of that insecurity piece
Mhm.
right as well.
Self-worth, for
Yes.
sure. I
Mhm.
also just want to mention that when you're in that response all the time, and this is the grief response too, this is when our immunity gets upset too, right?
Mm,
Like, so we have to be mindful, right? Like, we're
sure.
giving it all the time. It's like the gas pedal's on all the time. You're
Mhm.
scanning all the time, right? You're like, okay, what needs to be done next, right? A
Right?
lot of moms out there know that. It's okay, right? And when they're young and they're put to bed, you're like, oh, thank goodness they're in bed. I can finally relax. But then, oh my goodness, I have lunches to do. I have this. So
Dishes
you're
in the
always,
sink. Yeah.
yeah, you're always on. And when we talk about self care, I really, as you said, what I like to say is deep dive. Self care by getting your nails done is great, but that's not what real self care is, right? Self
Agreed.
care is also community.
Yes.
Like, what it
Mhm.
would have done for you and me in the same like situation in our divorces, I would have
Mhm.
loved to have community like this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I don't know where we came from, and maybe just the community that we lived in, divorce wasn't really a thing. And I don't know, maybe divorce, you don't just seek out a community where divorce is prevalent, but it is everywhere. We just didn't necessarily have the friends that were divorced. And so that's probably why people didn't know how to talk to us or me, I guess, in general, just be like, hey, checking in, are you okay? But I loved what you just said about the always being on part and it really is so true. It's like it's almost like you're on this autopilot or driven by a motor or whatever. It's like, okay, this needs to get done, this needs to get done, this needs to get done. And there's really no time to realize that you're kind of spiraling into this, you know, people pleasing mode because it just needs to get done. So
Yeah, I call it the internal scanner because
mhm.
it's like you're not really aware that you're doing it,
Yes,
but
exactly.
you're like, if you imagine, right? Like, you're just like this, and I'm doing it all the time, and
Mhm.
my kids are 20 and 22.
Yeah,
Like, they're young adults. They're still young, but
right.
it doesn't seem to go away really. Like, that's another thing with the fawning and people pleasing. It just doesn't go away very fast.
Yes,
It's
yes.
pretty ingrained. I want to ask you about art. So you became a songwriter. Has this something you always wanted to do? And also on the other end, and I believe really truly that art can help heal. So what are your thoughts on, like, how did you get into it, and what are your thoughts about the art?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think art helps people heal, whether it's visual arts or drawing or songwriting. Any kind of art is very therapeutic. I think that's actually why therapists use art as a
Mhm.
means of therapy. Um, I think I chose songwriting. I've always loved poetry, even as a kid, and going through some of my stuff when my parents were moving. Reading my poetry, I'm like, oh, that's. I wouldn't say it's necessarily good, but I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting that I chose to keep these poems that I wrote as opposed to like pieces of art that I would draw or whatever. But um, always loved poetry and just how it flowed. I love the rhythm, and sometimes you get a cadence from it. And I've never been a journaler per se, but for whatever reason, 2018 is when I really started digging in. I don't know what prompted it, honestly. I just loved songwriting. At one point, maybe actually I should backtrack and just say at one point, I had told my ex-husband once I had passed my CPA exam that I wanted to get back into piano lessons because I missed playing an instrument. And my grandfather was a beautiful pianist, and I would love sitting and watching him play the piano. And I was like, I want to get back into that at some point. Of course, never did because everyone else came first, never made the time for myself to do it. And then I do attribute my guitar playing
to him because for my 38th birthday, he got me guitar lessons. And that was the impetus for me. Once learned my first 3 chords, I'm like, man, this is trouble because all I want to do now is sit and noodle on the guitar and write songs. And they were terrible. I mean, my first probably hundreds of songs were absolutely garbage, but it was a means for me to get my feelings out and just write about stuff that I had buried for forever. And no one even had to read it. It's buried in some of the stuff is still buried in my computer and probably no one will ever read it until I pass on and give this, away. But that was kind of the start of me getting into art. But I do feel like probably I chose music, just because my dad would sit and listen to jazz and Motown all the time. Like he would have all of these CDs on repeat and, things I remember as a kid, like music was always being played in my house and I would sit in my room and study the CD inserts. Like this song was written by this person and let me just see if I can pay attention to the lyrics. And I guess subconsciously that was getting me prepared for doing it now. I never intended to be a songwriter. It just kind of naturally happened. But, you know, if I had it my way, I would put accounting aside 100% and just fully focus on songwriting if it paid my bills, but it doesn't. So we have to fall back on plan B. So yeah, I guess that's a long way of saying is that it was never in my plans. I just feel like music is such a connecting language. And that's what I love about it is that you don't ever feel alone. Like someone can always pull something from a song that is relatable. And I think for me, going back to that whole sense of community piece, like when you feel alone, like you're not really alone. Just turn on a song and you're in there with them. So,
Yeah, I would highly recommend everyone listen to your tracks. I was
well,
listening to
thank you.
them before, especially "Eager to Please" and "The Boundaries." Um,
Thank you.
we
Appreciate
all
it.
need more of those.
Yes, we
So
do.
I do have a question about so a lot of times is when you're aware that you are, and you start making some, you know, I'm going to say no, or with your ex, you are going to get pushback. So I just want you to
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that. Have you had any, when you've awakened to this and you become aware and you're doing this podcast about it, have you gotten any pushback from anybody about you not being the 100% on people pleaser all the time?
Ah, I would say, I mean, aside from my mom calling me out on that one episode, because maybe I went a little overboard on that particular episode of like airing dirty laundry, I would say no, not necessarily, because honestly, Karen, I still feel like I struggle with setting boundaries. So I've, I think I've only told my ex no once that I couldn't watch the girls or take the girls on a day that it was his because I already had plans. Every other time I feel like I've rearranged my life or my schedule in order to accommodate his. And so, to your point earlier, I don't know if it's a sense of guilt or wanting him to finally be happy. Like I don't know what it is, but it is a constant battle, internal battle trying to be like there should be a healthy balance here. You don't always have to say yes when he needs you to say yes. So, TBD on that one.
A quick question about that though. In
Yeah.
your divorce process,
Mhm.
did you people fond response throughout the process, or did you, because you're an accountant, he's an
Yeah.
accountant, you guys know how to crunch the numbers very well. So
Mhm.
did the people pleaser not win and the accountant won? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of
So
times with fawners, like people
there
pleasers, they tend to just, some of us just kind of, okay, sign because we don't want to upset the
yes.
he- the
So
ex.
yeah, absolutely. Well, interesting story. So yes, we are both accountants. However, he managed the finances, and I had said to him at one point, "I feel like I can just blindly" now granted, I am a saver, I do not frivolously spend on stuff, so he was fortunate that I'm not one of these, like, materialistic people that was like, "Oh, I want this, I want this, I want this." I was very tight with stuff, and not to the point where we're wearing, like, you know, holes in our shoes and that kinda stuff, but, within reason, and so
but I mentioned to him, I'm like, "You manage the finances. I don't even know how much money you're bringing in. I don't even have access to our bank accounts." So, I was blind. It was like I was blindly in this. I didn't know how much was coming in. I didn't know how much our credit card statement was, and I'm not kidding you, Karen. And so, like, what's the word I'm looking for? As an accountant, I that's shameless. I feel like I should have been more aware of what our finances were. That is a joint conversation. And every time I would say, "Hey, can we meet to talk about this?" He would do it, but he would make these conversations so elaborate and all over the place. I was just like, I don't really need the big dissertation. I just need ABC. That's it. I don't need to know like what stocks we're investing in and this is this and this return is it. Like, I don't really want to know that. In fact, I really don't care about that. I just want to know basic in and out. What's our budget look like? That kind of thing. And I just felt like I don't know if that was his one way of controlling the situation because he knew that I could handle everything. Like, literally, I handled everything else but the finances. And so I feel like that was a shame on me for not having a better grip on that. So when it came time to divorce, I told him one night, I said, I just cannot do this anymore. I'm miserable. You're miserable. We're literally walking on eggshells. We're like two ships passing in the night. We're literally roommates living under the same roof. And, a week or two later, I'm out walking our dogs and he comes out into the front yard and he's like, Natalie, I just want to let you know I filed for divorce. And I was like, okay. And honestly, it wasn't like I'm crying out of like, oh my God, my life is over. I'm crying because I'm like, okay, I got to figure out a full-time job because I'm like all the logistics stuff. I'm like, how are we going to split custody and who's taking this and where am I going to live and how long do I get to stay here before I have to move out? And I was the one to move out. He kept the house. I moved out. And so I made it easy it's like I made everything easy for him. So all that to say, um, I I feel like, yes, I kinda signed on the dotted line because I'm just like, "I just want this done. I just want this done. Like, can we just move on with our lives?" And honestly, we co-parent pretty well. I still get frustrated with him because he is just who he's gonna be. And, you can't change that. He's not a bad person. That's the thing. Is like, he's not a bad person. We just were not good together. And so honestly, I have to commend ourselves, Karen, because we've had other people come up to us, or at least say to me, and then I have relayed it to him that they're impressed with the way we co-parent. We show up to sports events together, we'll kind of sit in the same vicinity. It's not hateful, and I don't wish him any ill will. It's just when we were in it, it was terrible. Miserable. It's almost like you're being stabbed and you can't breathe. It's one of those situations where you're like, this is not life. You're not living your life. This is just miserable. So, yeah,
Well,
long-winded,
thanks.
long-winded
No,
explanation there. But
thanks for sharing that honest story too, and being vulnerable with all of us and telling
yeah.
us that because when it comes to finances, a lot of, and I'm a thanatologist and I deal with a lot of this too with the widows and I've helped over the years, but it's pretty common that women don't deal with the finances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very common. So there's no shame, please, because it just is it's just we all have, as someone said, home economics. Like we all have, you have this role, you had this role, and
Yes.
we all played that role.
Yes.
So is there anything you want to say before we wrap up? I asked the last question.
I don't think so. Just thanks for having me on, Karen. It's been great chatting with you.
So the last question I ask everyone is for someone who's just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
This one, hands down for me, we've talked about it already, but I just want to reemphasize the sense of community and not shutting people out. I mean, some people may not know how to approach you, but letting people in and, even if it's you seeking people out, it does go both ways because I was not so good at being proactive and reaching out to friends or even family members. But knowing that you're not alone, again, I think that was another reason why I started the whole podcast is just knowing that you're not alone in this. Other people have experienced it and there are resources out there to help you get through it. And like I said, sense of community, I feel like for me would be hands down that solution.
So Natalie, you have, if you want to have on the podcast where it's located, where they can find it, and your songs, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. So Natalie Auto Music is where you can find the songs that we're releasing related to the podcast and just some other individual projects that I've done over the years. But Eager to Please podcast is the name of the podcast. It is related to this people pleasing notion and fawning notion that Karen and I and a lot of other advocates of ours and friends of ours are trying to get the word out that it is a real thing and we should talk about it more because there's a community of supporters.
Yeah, we call them recovery people pleasers
Yes.
because we're still trying to recover.
Exactly right.
Right?
That's exactly
Well,
right.
Natalie, it was awesome to have you on. I would suggest, I said to you before, in the middle of the podcast, I said, everyone go check out this Eager to Please song and her other songs. But also, really, if you are a fawner people pleaser, listen to the podcast, Natalie's podcast, because again, isolation is not good. Having community, listening to other people's story and going, oh my goodness, I'm not alone, is really important. So thank you, Natalie, for coming on and doing all the good work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks for joining today's conversation with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guests, and don't forget to follow us on Spotify and our YouTube channel at divorceworkshop.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. And for a complete guide to navigating separation and divorce, check out the Just Separated workbook on Amazon. It covers emotions, co-parenting, finances, legal insights, and recovery. A must-have for anyone going through separation or divorce.